Last night, on Friday night, we got some new reports about the ongoing interference scandal that's happening here in Canada, including reports that CSIS, Canada's intelligence agency, has specifically been focusing on two Liberal politicians, and actually the Prime Minister was briefed on this in 2019 and chose to endorse a nomination of one of these candidates who is accused of being a part of this interference scheme. He still gave the check mark, giving him the opportunity to run to be a member of parliament, and he eventually ended up winning. I'm gonna give you some context here as we get started with a video from this report, and then I want to get into this Twitter thread that the reporter who's actually been investigating this for over 8 months put together just last night. It was rather shocking. I think it's very surprising, and I think you're going to find it quite interesting. We're going to break it down here live all today, and I see some people hopping in the chat. If you're here on the live, one of the rare people who's actually able to see this live, and so let me know if you're here in the chat. We've got Black Knight and Base and Matic. Good to see you again, Base. And Perry, good to see you. Tom, Sandra, hello. Richard, Zach. Lots of stuff going on here. We're going to hop over here. Hey, James and Who Dat Canuck. What scandal? Well, let's get some context here and flip over to the first video that I want to show you. And we're going to sort of piece this all together slowly as to what's going on. Oh, Dr. Sriram, so nice of you to leave the super chat there. I see... I can sort of see your super chat here. That's so nice of you to send that in and support the channel and these live streams that we're doing. Yeah, good to see everyone. Let's get into this. Let's get into the information right from the YouTube theater here. We're going to be adding context and sort of building out this story as we go with this live stream today.
Investigation into alleged attempts by Beijing to interfere in Canada's democratic process.
Here we go.
Global News can reveal new allegations emerging from an ongoing probe by the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. Intelligence sources tell Global News that investigators have been tracking current Ontario Liberal MP Han Dong since the summer of 2019. And those sources say he is one of 11 Toronto area riding candidates believed to be supported by Beijing in the lead up to that year's federal election, and alleged to be an affiliate in China's election interference networks.
Let's break down how significant that is. The allegations are that this Toronto riding member of parliament, who is currently a member of parliament in Canada, the allegations from the Global News, these relatively credible reporters that have been on this case for about 8 months, is that a sitting member of parliament is part of an interference campaign by the Chinese government, and he was sort of the chosen candidate to win this riding and won the riding and is a part of it. Let's keep going here.
Tonight, Mackenzie Gray has the new revelations in this Global News investigation. Mackenzie.
Farah, after an 8-month investigation, intelligence sources have told Global News that current Liberal MP Han Dong is alleged to have been supported by Beijing in 2019, and the Prime Minister's senior staff were warned about it. Reliably read since 1993, scoring the Liberal nomination in Don Valley North has been harder than winning a general election recently. But instead of leaning on his connections as a former Ontario MPP, sources say Han Dong had help from the Chinese consulate in Toronto to become the 2019 Liberal candidate in the riding. Through a combination of CSIS documents and intelligence sources, Global News has learned the consulate allegedly sent 2 busloads of Chinese Canadian seniors to the Don Valley North Liberal nomination meeting, and those seniors knew who to vote for because Don's name was written on their arm.
So this riding, Don Valley North, it's been traditionally for a number of years, Liberals win it every time. There's typically ridings like that across Canada that you have a general support for a certain party. In Hamilton, there's a lot of ridings that are always NDP. Out west, there's a lot of ridings that are always conservative. Even in the Durham region around Toronto, they're typically always conservative. Toronto downtown, typically always Liberal, and that's what this riding sort of falls under. So the idea here is that if you get the nomination to be the Liberal candidate for this member of parliament, essentially that's giving you the win in giving you the seat in the riding. The allegations here are that the Chinese consulate organized busloads of the seniors to go and vote in this sort of primary election, if you want to use the U.S. analog for what this is, and to give this person that was targeted as the person that the CCP wanted in this seat, sort of sent busloads of people here to vote in that primary election to give him the Liberal nomination. Let's continue here. More context to come, because this one's wild.
Sources also say CSIS suspected that Chinese international students with faked addresses were bussed in and told by the PRC consulate to support their preferred candidate if they wanted to maintain their student visa status. Dong denied allegations he was helped by Beijing, calling them false accusations that slander me and the community I represent. My nomination in 2019 was open and followed the rules. The Liberal Party of Canada echoed that nomination was open, adding Dong was elected by registered Liberals in a race that followed their national rules. Global News has not verified the allegations against Dong, but even if they are found true, political parties are private organizations and can set their own rules. Non-Canadians can vote in Liberal nomination races if they live in the riding and are party members.
This is Han Dong. I'm the Liberal candidate for Darjeeling North.
Dong won the nomination, but he still needed Justin Trudeau's stamp of approval to carry the Liberal banner in the suburban Toronto riding, one with a sizable diaspora of Chinese Canadians. A senior intelligence official told Global News CSIS shared their concerns about Dong in late September 2019 during a classified briefing with senior Liberal Party staff who hold security clearances. In that meeting, CSIS urged them to rescind Dong's nomination.
So in order to run for this riding, you need to get the checkmark from the Prime Minister that, yes, you are our Liberal candidate. And that is a checkmark that the Prime Minister gave, despite the fact, or what the sources are saying and what Global News is reporting, that CSIS gave a briefing to the Prime Minister before this nomination confirmation and said, hey, we don't think that you should be, you should rescind your nomination here. This person shouldn't be able to run for the following reasons.
CSIS was concerned that Han Dong was connected to the People's Republic of China Foreign Interference Network in Canada, an official with knowledge of the brief told Global News. Despite the alleged warnings to his staff, Trudeau approved Dong's candidacy. During the election, a top Liberal organizer even warned Dong's team that he was allegedly a CSIS target, according to sources. Dong is still an MP today. Global News asked the Prime Minister's office multiple questions, including if Trudeau knew Dong was allegedly a CSIS target. But PMO didn't respond to any of our questions, saying there were so many factual inaccuracies that it's not possible to begin to even answer them. Farah?
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thank you, Mackenzie. With me now is investigative reporter Sam Cooper. He broke the first stories about attempted Chinese interference and has been working his sources on this for months. Sam, let me start with, what's your understanding of why the Liberal candidate, this Liberal candidate, Han Dong, now an elected MP, was the preferred candidate for the Chinese Communist Party?
Yeah, so this reporter is someone that we're going to take a closer look at here with a shocking Twitter thread that I think goes into all of these details, and we can take some time sort of tearing this story apart and finding like what is true and what the actual allegations are here. So let's listen in first on what he says on this Global News report, and then we're going to take a look at his Twitter thread that he put out last night, which has actually got me hip to what was going on here and what is actually being alleged. I found the Twitter thread even more shocking than the report after watching this first report.
Farah, our sourcing says the point of China's interference is it wants Canadian officials to favor China's interests. So China targets favored candidates, and by giving them clandestine support and funding, helps elect them. This creates a bond of obligation, so these Canadian politicians won't criticize China on human rights issues, or they might support China on big issues, such as perhaps the case of Mun Wanzhou and our Michaels imprisoned in China, for example. With regards to Mr. Don specifically.
So before we go farther into Don specifically, what he's saying here is like, what's the point? Why do they want to interfere? Why is there this campaign of interference? What he's saying is, well, if you have received money or have received support that has given you the election to give you the riding that you've won, well, then you have a debt to the party that has sort of helped you get there, which means maybe, like we saw last year, you're not going to vote in favor of saying that what's happening in China's northwestern Western province with the Uyghurs is classified as a genocide, something that the Liberals didn't vote to recognize, right? Not using the language of genocide. This is one of the things that people are saying, okay, maybe there's a debt of obligation here, as well as the situation with the one of the high-ups at Huawei and the sort of extradition case to the U.S. last year, sort of trying to get these favorable decisions made for the interests of foreign agents, right? Let's get into more detail here.
Specifically, to be clear, he has denied the allegations, but what our sources say is that CSIS called Don a close contact of Toronto consulate officials. Also, in 2019, he allegedly met with a senior Chinese Communist Party official in New York State as part of China's interference plot. So the concern is he is being directed by these officials.
Well, the Prime Minister says he's aware of Chinese interference generally and knows it's a serious issue, even raised it when he met Chinese President Xi Jinping last year. Yet your sources have told you that senior officials in the Prime Minister's office were given a classified briefing warning one of their candidates was part of this clandestine election interference network and urging them to rescind his nomination, but they didn't do that. So what's behind the disconnect there?
Farah, first of all, I pressed the Prime Minister's office, but they would not confirm they received this briefing. But my sources say Michael Chan, a veteran Liberal politician who was a top target in these investigations and allegedly promoted Don in 2019, is a significant fundraiser for Trudeau's party and also has the ability to recommend nomination candidates in Toronto. Farah, Michael Chan has denied the allegations, but my sources raised the question of whether the Liberal Party may be downplaying CSIS warnings on Chan because of the influence and success he has inside the party. Farah, also, my source...
So that's impactful. I want to pause here to emphasize how impactful this is. So they're saying Han Dong is the person who sort of won this riding, and the reason that Liberals may not want to have rescinded that nomination prior to that election is because of the support that Michael Chan gave to that nominee. Michael Chan, former Ontario member of provincial parliament, who apparently, based on the sources from Global, is a large fundraiser for the Liberal Party. So these are two key players in this story. We're going to continue on this video, but I want to show you something that I've been sort of putting together here so that we can sort of track, and you'll see this in some of my other videos, is Excalibur, right? This so we can sort of get to know what is going on here, who's who, and what is happening in this story. We're going to be adding to this over the course of the stream. We've got Han Dong, the member of parliament, who allegedly is a member of this clandestine network, sort of focused on interfering in elections, and Michael Chan, what these sources from Global are saying, is also a member of this, or is privy to this situation that's going on, and that the Liberal Party is sort of hesitant to call out and to upset because, again, according to these sources, this person is a very large donor and a fundraiser for the Liberal Party. So important things to note. Let's continue here before we get into Sam Cooper's Twitter thread that I think is the most impactful part of all of this.
Sources fear the Prime Minister isn't addressing the real issue here. As we reported, CSIS believes elections are fixed in party nominations. So if China controls a riding's funding and community volunteer networks and successfully promotes a candidate in a riding that's almost always won by a certain party, this is akin to winning a seat in Ottawa. Farah?
Explosive reporting. I'm sure reaction will start pouring in. Sam Cooper in Ottawa. Thank you, Sam.
Absolutely wild. Again, sort of like emphasizing what I was just saying about, okay, this isn't they're messing with the votes when there's actually a federal election. There are ridings that are consistently one party rather than the other. So if you can get the person that you want to be a member of parliament to win the nomination prior to the election, well, then that's essentially the same as winning a seat in some of these ridings where it's the same party that wins every single time. Like the Conservatives, like I said, in Durham region where I am, it's typically Conservatives will win these ridings. In Hamilton, NDP, and some ridings, I'm sure in Western provinces have a typical leaning towards one party winning that riding consistently over and over again. So I found that quite interesting. If you're just tuning in, let me know that you're here and you're watching in the chat. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna chop up this live stream video to make a more compact video for people to consume who aren't here live with us, right? Or don't have the time to be here and get all of the details that you're getting here live with me on this Saturday. I hope you have your coffee, because now we're going to get into the Twitter thread from this reporter who's been on this case for at least 8 months, covering this alleged interference and what this network looks like. I think that this Twitter thread is going to surprise you, because this is what really made me think, hey, I need to start covering this on the channel, because it's something that not a lot of folks are talking about, and it's no longer only being reported by more fringe media organizations. It was actually being reported by some of the more credible investigators and the people who many people have looked at over time as credible. So let's get into this. We're going to flip over to the Twitter thread here. Let me get it up on my screen so that you can see it as well. Sam Cooper, yes, this is the journalist, and we're going to flip over to browser view. Take a look at this. I'm going to actually unzoom a little bit so you can read that a little more clearly, and we'll add to that sort of chart that I made of all the people that are involved in this story. So let's get into it. So Sam Cooper, breaking: my investigation for Global News identifies that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's senior aides were allegedly briefed by CSIS shortly before the October 2019 federal election that this candidate that we've been talking about was suspected to be involved in a People's Republic of China foreign interference. So that's the main allegation here, but it gets into a lot more detail. This is like a 40 tweet thread. So let's dig in, folks. I'm gonna make it actually, I slide this over so that you can read it a little more clearly while we're zoomed in here. I think that that'll be helpful for you to sort of see what's going on. After my 8-month investigation, actually also I'm going to pull up Epic Pen so I can sort of highlight things here on the screen as we're going through it. After my 8-month investigation, Global News can reveal new allegations emerging from CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, ongoing probe into a Chinese Communist Party election interference scheme. According to my sources, CSIS started tracking this member of parliament, Han Dong, a former Ontario member of provincial parliament, in summer of 2019. So CSIS was already concerned about this individual prior to them winning the MP seat, like the federal government seat. They were actually taking a look at this politician when they were just an Ontario member of provincial parliament. Important to note. They said that CSIS believed that Dong emerged suddenly and suspiciously as a successor to Geng Tan as the Liberal candidate for Don Valley North. These CSIS investigators would later allege that Chinese Canadian seniors and students were bussed into the riding, and students were told that they had to vote for a certain candidate to keep their student visas. Like, holy shit! If these allegations are true, this is absolutely wild, right? We have students told that they have to vote for a certain candidate to keep their student visas. So we have the consulate telling these individuals, you have to go here to this riding and vote in this way, otherwise your student visa that your parents have paid so much for you to come here and study in Canada, to go to probably U of T or whatever Ryerson's now called, something technical university, in order to continue going here, you got to go here and you got to vote for this individual in this sort of primary election determining the Liberal nomination. So pretty wild here. Sources informed Global News so that's what they said, bust in these students. This is on top of what we already covered in the video, where they say they were bussing in seniors as well, who had written on their arms the name of the person they were supposed to vote in this primary election. I'm sure we get into more of that in this Twitter thread. National security officials also allege that Han Dong, now a sitting MP, re-elected in 2021, is one of at least 11 Toronto area riding candidates supported by Beijing in 2019. So what they're saying is that there's at least 11 ridings that had candidates that were supported by Beijing, potentially doing similar things that they did for Han Dong, right? We're extrapolating here. We don't know. This is alleged, right? But what they're sort of evoking here is that maybe there were more candidates in the Toronto area. Again, typically Liberal in this area, but it could be other parties as well that sort of have candidates that seem more favorable to Chinese interests. There's at least 11 of these ridings where there has been influence here. Now, we don't know that all of them were successful in winning their riding like Han Dong was, but we can say, okay, potentially up to 11 or more areas had similar sort of tactics ongoing here. Tactics where you bring in busloads of people to win the primary election in a riding riding, where winning that primary, right, because the riding is always typically one party that wins it, is essentially like winning the MP seat in the end, right? These officials said CSIS also believes Dong is a witting affiliate in China's election interference. So now the response from Han Dong, the sitting Liberal member of Parliament, Dong strongly denies these allegations. This is the exact quote from him. As a member of Parliament, safeguarding Canada's democratic institutions is a fundamental part of my job, and I take all serious allegations of foreign interference very seriously. I am unaware of the claims provided to you by alleged sources, which contain seriously inaccurate information, Dong said in answer to my questions in this investigation. So let's get a little bit into what Sam Cooper's saying are his sources, right? He alleges that individuals from CSIS came to him with this information, with these documents that show Han Dong has been a target of these CSIS investigations since 2019. Now, obviously, Sam Cooper can't reveal his sources, right? One, for his journalistic integrity, because if you reveal your sources, no one's going to come to you with information in the future. But two, because these people could actually be criminally prosecuted for releasing this CSIS information to a journalist, right? We'll get into this later because in one of Sam's articles, he says, hey, it feels like CSIS individuals are coming to me to report on this because they feel that the Prime Minister isn't taking this seriously enough, and they think for the credibility of our elections, we need to be talking about this more. But obviously, they aren't allowed to share that information, so that's why this is such a big deal. I think we get into that more later in this Twitter thread. So they say, and this is just from 19 hours ago, remember, we broke this story on Global National tonight. That's the video we watched at the top of this stream. And I will be digging into the implications on Sunday with Mercedes Global and former CSIS director Dick Fadden. It'll be interesting to see if that's already up. Maybe remind me to go check and to go take a look at this to see if this report is up. But I haven't seen that yet. On our broadcast tonight, I explain how CSIS believes that the former Ontario Liberal Trade Minister, Michael Chen, this is the other sort of individual in this story right now, that Michael Chen, the former Liberal Trade Minister, promoted Han Dong to take the riding nomination, and Michael Chen is also a top target in an ongoing CSIS investigation, according to these sources with knowledge. Remember, Michael Chen, let me flip over, this is the individual that we're talking about here, who is the former Ontario member of provincial parliament, who in that video, they say, this is a person who fundraises pretty heavily for the Liberals, so perhaps there's incentive there to sort of not take as close a look at what's going on here. Okay, so back to this thread. Let me unzoom so we can see it all. In the alleged briefing, the service did not provide details of their ongoing investigations into Michael Chan and Han Dong, but outlined two major allegations to support the recommendations, sources aware of the intelligence said. Going on, CSIS was concerned that Han Dong was connected to the PRC, the PRC's foreign interference in Canada, and that Han Dong was also a close contact of Michael Chen, who was also a target of CSIS. Again, this is all as of 2019, prior to like 2 elections ago, right? The 2019 election, and then we had the 2021 election. We're going to get into the Prime Minister's response here in just a moment, but he's saying we have a panel that takes a look at this, and they determined that these elections weren't altered. The result of these elections weren't altered as a result of interference, but we've talked about this on the channel before. That could also include it could include a situation where ridings did flip as a result of interference, but it didn't result in a difference between minority or majority government or who is in power, right? That is how you can say it didn't impact the outcome of the elections, because we would have still had a minority and we would have still been in power as Liberals. It wouldn't have been Conservatives, even if there wasn't this interference. That's what people are saying. Okay, these words are a little bit loose, right? But rather than heeding the alleged CSIS concerns about Dong, the party allowed him to proceed in 2019, and he won the seat. Furthermore, 2 sources alleged 2 weeks after the briefing that a Liberal Party staffer responsible for overseeing 25 GTA ridings allegedly informed Dong's team that they were a target of CSIS investigations. This was a classified briefing of serious and extremely sensitive nature to the Liberal Party of Canada senior staff who hold security clearances, an intelligence official told me in my investigation for Global News. Now, some background on Sam Cooper's investigation. Since last summer, he's known that Michael Chan is a top target in the service's high-profile, sensitive investigation into this United Front Work Department election. United Front refers to the sort of the concerted efforts of the CCP to sort of go out into the world and have influence over different countries. This is a plan that's sort of out there, right? Saying we want to develop more influence in these other countries. Mr. Chen vehemently denies all allegations that he is an agent of Beijing involved in federal election interference. I learned, though, that CSIS has been watching Chan for over a decade. Over 10 years, CSIS has been watching Chan, even taking interest in his expansive mansion in Markham. And here's an image of it that Sam Cooper was able to get. I wasn't able to find any more images of this mansion in Markham, but this apparently CSIS is interested in this mansion specifically. Not too many more details on this. Now, through sources and documents which will be quoted in the following thread, I learned that CSIS believes that Michael Chen is allegedly an agent of Beijing who has secretly provided political information to the Toronto consulate. Chan, of course, is denying all of this, right? This sort of vague innuendo is impossible to respond to after he got reached out to and let know that this story was going to air. He said in an emailed response, "To the extent you are suggesting I am not a true Canadian, you should be ashamed of yourself." So that's Chan's response to these reports, is that you should be ashamed of yourself, and it's too vague and you're not actually alleging anything specific here, so how am I supposed to respond to it? Intelligence sources spoke to Global News for this story on the condition of anonymity, which they requested because they risk prosecution under the Security of Information Act. This is what I was talking about, right? The sources could be prosecuted, the ones that are coming to Sam Cooper allegedly and bringing them this information. They could be prosecuted under the Security of Information Act for leaking this CSIS information that both Dong and Chan have been targets of CSIS investigations for years now. The circumstances under which Han Dong replaced incumbent Liberal Gang Tan as candidate for Don Valley North was a focus of this investigation and the core of the suspected interference from Beijing. Okay, let's continue. CSIS allegedly had intelligence that Beijing preferred Han Dong to Tan. The consulate was not pleased with Gang Tan's performance. A national security official aware of the service's investigation told Global News. Okay, so I'm going to take a breath here because that's a lot to dive into. We've got these allegations of bringing people in to be extra votes in a primary election to give the nomination for a riding. We've got information here about how long CSIS has been watching these individuals and why certain CSIS individuals have now leaked these documents and this information to Sam Cooper, largely because they don't feel like it's being taken seriously enough. And of course, you need reporters to go in and hold governments to account, right? Like that's the function of reporters. So wild stuff. I need to take a sip of coffee here. Yeah, I know this stuff does sound unbelievable, right? And that's why you do take this stuff with a little bit of skepticism. What actually is happening here? We don't have these public documents. We don't have what Sam Cooper alleges that he has. So it's tough to know for sure what exactly happened. But if we're to believe the journalistic integrity of Global News, well, certainly they have reliable sources that are giving them this information. We're going to get into Trudeau's response to this because he has been questioned on it now as of last night. We're going to watch that video very soon. But I think it's absolutely wild. I'm just going to take a look at chat here. We've got Kelly saying Jag will be arrested. I'm not sure what that's referring to. It's an election loophole in the Elections Act. Candace here is saying there's enough out there that there needs to be some level on inquiry. Yeah, I agree with you, Candace. There needs to be some sort of public inquiry here, but this, and we're going to get to it, Trudeau has sort of ruled out this being a public inquiry, saying that he's happy enough with what's going on in the House of Commons committee meetings to sort of investigate this. That's the the committee meeting that I covered in the previous stream, actually in the previous, it wasn't in the previous stream on this subject. It was actually in the video that was like the edit of that previous stream. So pretty wild. I'm gonna take a sip and let's get back into Sam Cooper's Twitter thread here. I think you can tell that I need my coffee when it comes to this type of stuff. Okay. So what happened once Dong was vying for nominee in Don Valley North? According to the case from CSIS from 2022, there can be systematic problems in underlying nomination processes. This is where there's the weakness, right? Individuals who are not Canadian citizens and therefore cannot vote in elections at any level of government in Canada can still legally vote in a party nomination process as long as they are party members. So this is what they're saying is like, you don't have to be a Canadian citizen to vote on what your preference is for the member of parliament who will then be voted in, right? So if you can vote and say, I want this Liberal candidate instead of this Liberal candidate. I want this Conservative candidate instead of this Conservative candidate. You don't have to be a Canadian citizen to vote in these type of primary, if we're going to steal language from how the States describes it, these types of primary elections. So that's where they're saying there's a weakness here, a vulnerability. It adds gaining a party's nomination in a riding that has long supported that party is akin to winning the subsequent election, and state actors exploit this loophole to engage in foreign interference that targets specific candidates in particular electoral ridings, what we were talking about, right? You have ridings where it's always going to be a Liberal that wins, or you have ridings where it's always going to be a Conservative that wins. That's how it has historically been in these individual ridings. That makes it very easy to get a person that you think is favorable to your interests to win that nomination, and effectively winning the nomination is winning the seat because of the history of what party has won that seat. So this stuff is wild. I was like laying in bed last night, like scrolling on my phone, reading this thread, and I'm like, oh, holy shit, I've got to talk about this on the live stream, use this platform to talk about what's going on here, these allegations, because I think it's absolutely wild. If you're just tuning in, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button to help more people find this stream. Usually when you hit that like button, it helps it sort of spread to more Canadians who might be interested in this sort of stuff, just like you may be. So while this report doesn't identify Dong specifically or his riding, the report describes the service's Don Valley North investigation findings, an intelligence official said. CSIS reporting indicates that during a political party nomination vote prior to the 2019 general election in Canada, 2 busloads of Chinese Canadian seniors were brought in to support a specific candidate. This is in the party nomination vote, not in the general election vote. So the same as the students who were told, you're going to lose your temporary student visa to be in Canada to study if you don't go here and vote for this individual. Just like these seniors were brought in to support a specific candidate, and this is what they said in the report, that like they had the name of the guy written on their arms so they would know who to vote for. Again, all of these are allegations based on the Global News report and Sam Cooper's reporting here. Okay. It adds that the seniors had the name, this is what I said, the name of the candidate they were told to vote for concealed under their sleeves. And international students were also transported in to support the same candidate. The students were given letters that provided them with an address in the specific riding, thereby enabling them to participate in the nomination vote. Wow, I don't think I clocked that the first time I read this. I don't think I clocked that. The students were given letters that provided them with an address in the specific riding, allowing them to participate in the nomination vote. Okay, so we have people that potentially do not live in that riding being bussed into that riding with what it seems like they're saying here, allegedly counterfeit letters that are sent to this individual to a certain address. So they have their name tied to a certain address, which is inside of that riding. Even though they don't live in that riding, they have a piece of mail, which is one of the things that you can use to say, hey, I can vote in this. Your information must be wrong. Look at this letter that was addressed to me at my home address, right? This is what they're using as proof of saying, like, I can vote in this primary election, this nomination election, right? That is wild. Because what are the implications of that? You're saying that maybe this doesn't happen just once, using the people that actually do live in the riding and trying to influence that. Instead, by providing these counterfeit letters, you can essentially have the same people move around and vote in multiple different primary election sort of campaigns here. Go around and vote to figure out who the MP support, like who the Liberal nominee or Conservative or NDP, right? Like this instance is talking about Liberals, but they're saying that essentially you could move these people around to vote in the primary election of who's going to be representing that riding. And they could do it over and over again because they have multiple letters. This is wild. Yeah, I agree with you. I see Bassamatic. This channel could get canceled. This is why I also have like the email list in the description there, because I kind of want to build up the people that are interested in the content that I make, because you never know when a platform is going to not allow you to be on that platform, right? It's not suppressing freedom of speech for YouTube to shut off a certain channel, right? Because that's a private company. They have every right to stop allowing certain content to go out there. But that's why I sort of have that email list. So if you're not already on that, I think that's one of the first links in the description there. Okay, so the 31st tweet in this thread, it adds the students were also told by the PRC consulate to support the specific candidate if they wanted to maintain their student visa status. Yeah, we've talked about that. CSIS intelligence indicates that this candidate is very close to and receives support from the PRC consulate. Let's continue here in the replies. Okay. In response to these details, okay, this is what the Liberal Party's response was. In response to these details, the Liberal Party of Canada said that Dong was nominated by registered Liberals in an open nomination process that complied with its national nomination rules. So they're just saying, we didn't detect any rules that were broken. Every single person who voted here had proof that they were like in this riding and that they were a registered Liberal in this open nomination process. So they're saying there was no foul play here, is what the Liberal Party seems to be saying based on this tweet. In my investigation, I reviewed sensitive documents. Again, sources have such concern for the future of Canadian elections and what they see as a lack of response in the Trudeau government's to growing threats that I was provided understanding and visibility on the documents. This is what I was talking about before, right? He's saying that there were the sources that brought him these documents, these CSIS documents, are concerned about the future of Canadian elections. It's super important that Canadians have faith in their election systems. Otherwise, you have something that happens like in the States where enough people don't believe that their elections were actually properly, like all of the proper guidelines were adhered to and that it was a credible election. These CSIS individuals that have these documents are essentially saying, we don't want that to happen in Canada. We feel like we have strong elections here, and because of what they're saying is a lack of response from the current Trudeau government to these threats, that potentially more Canadians will have less faith in these elections, right? And that's a big problem because you need faith in your electoral system to have credible elections, right? Otherwise, you have a sort of cascading a set of circumstances like we saw in the U.S. where like half the population, obviously I'm exaggerating, thought that those elections weren't credible. And that's why it's important to respond to these types of things and why these documents were leaked at threat of persecution, right? The Security of Information Act says you can't leak this kind of stuff, but they still did because they're saying, I'm worried about the credibility of our elections if this isn't taken more seriously. Sources said that some of the service's more pointed concerns about Chan and Dong's actions in the Ontario legislature are documented in a July 2018 CSIS record, Foreign Influence Activities in Canada, Critical Threats to Canadian Democracy, all the way back in 2018. This is wild. Like, were you guys hip to all of this? Like, this only really got on my radar about 2 months ago when the first Globe and Mail and Global stories came out about this alleged election interference. Wow. Yeah, my tinfoil hat has melted by now. And this is the challenging thing because, like, when we don't take these things seriously, once there starts to be evidence here, then, like, these things that seemed more fringe before we got more of this evidence. How am I trying to say this here? if you don't take things seriously when they start to get serious, then it gives more credence to more sort of fringe beliefs that may not be true, right? When things that were seen as fringe beliefs are seen to be true, then you can sort of have this false equivalency that, okay, all of this stuff that I believe that may not have accurate sources as of yet, I'm going to start believing that that's 100% true, because even when the things have more credible sources, they're not being taken seriously. Do you understand what I'm trying to get across here? I don't think I said that the most eloquently, but I think you get what I mean. This individual provided political information to the PRC consulate and offered to verbally attack other members of the provincial assembly who raised Chinese human rights issues. It adds, PRC consulate officials and 2 members of provincial legislature persuaded a member of parliament at a specific community event to decline an invitation to travel to Taiwan. That's wild. The PRC ambassador was kept apprised throughout the event on the progress of their efforts. Wow. We had consulate officials from the Chinese embassy and 2 members of provincial parliament, MPPs, right, the provincial government, persuaded a member of parliament, a federal member of parliament, that's an MP, at a community event to not go to Taiwan. Obviously, China lays claim to Taiwan as a part of China. People in Taiwan say that's not so. Obviously, a big area of concern. Both like geopolitically, right? Because China's laying claim to this area. They'd say this isn't a separate country. This is part of China. So a big deal that they don't want Canadian politicians legitimizing the independence of Taiwan by going there. 3 intelligence sources said that Michael Chen and Han Dong were the unidentified Ontario Liberal MPPs, cited in this record, who allegedly pressured Liberal MP Gang Tong to forego the Taiwan trip. So it's the same individuals, Michael Chen, former MPP, provincial parliament, and alleged high fundraiser for the Liberal Party, and Han Dong, who is the current member of parliament for the Liberal Party, were allegedly the people who convinced Gang Tan, the person that Han Dong later took his role in Don Valley North, took the seat from him, took the Liberal nomination as a result of these busloads of people being bussed in. They told Gang Tan that you shouldn't go to Taiwan. That's not a good idea. Wow. Her story, end. Okay, and so this is the document that came out, the Global News report. And let me open this in a new tab. Because now I want to show you the response from Trudeau last night. I think that this was prior to all of the information coming out, like fully on the Global News report, but this was a live press conference from yesterday where Trudeau was questioned on this, and this is where he says, like, we don't need a public inquiry. I'm satisfied by what we're getting from the members of Parliament who are in this House committee. So let's listen in on the response here.
For media, nous avons 20 minutes pour les questions des médias, and we will begin with Laura Stone from the Globe and Mail. À vous la parole.
Hi, Prime Minister. Thank you for taking our questions. I wanted to ask on another topic regarding China. You said yesterday there were many inaccuracies in the leaks from CSIS. Can you explain exactly what is inaccurate in these leaked CSIS reports?
First of all, I think Canadians understand how important it is that we continue to do all the necessary work with our national security institutions to keep Canadians safe, to keep our institutions safe. And Canadians can be and should be confident that our institutions, particularly our electoral and democratic processes, have not been compromised, were not compromised in the 2019 or 2021 elections. We created mechanisms for both before the 2019 elections, a panel, a task force, to ensure that the outcome of these elections were decided by Canadians and Canadians alone. And that's exactly what happened. At the same time, we've been very clear throughout that foreign governments like China, Russia, and others are attempting to destabilize our democracies and, yes, interfere with our electoral processes. we need to remain vigilant. We need to be continuing to support our national security agencies and officials to protect and continue to protect the legitimacy and the integrity of our elections. That's also why we continue to support and encourage the work being happening at various committees, the various investigations and follow-ups, and the level to which this is being taken seriously by all Canadians, because it is a very serious subject. I will highlight, for example, around inaccuracies, that when the National Security and Intelligence Advisor appeared at committee a number of weeks or months ago, she highlighted inaccuracies that were contained in some of these media leaks. But we will continue to respect the importance of national security laws and rules.
Follow-up?
Okay. Ce qui est le plus important dans tout ça, c'est de comprendre.
Okay, we're going to skip over the French to the next response because it seems like there is a follow-up here. But we have Trudeau saying we need to work with CSIS to make sure that our electoral and democratic processes are not compromised. We need to support our security agencies, referring to CSIS itself, right? And this is something that Trudeau has regularly said. We need to continue to support CSIS. Trudeau has said we recognize that there are attempts to sort of destabilize our democracy and destabilize our elections by foreign agents, and he sort of cites China and Russia and I believe Iran as well. Maybe that was not in this video, maybe it was in a previous one. But that makes you question, okay, why are CSIS individuals, people who have access to these documents, now apparently going to reporters to bring this information to them? Sam Cooper from that Twitter thread that we were just reading says that they're going to reporters now because they feel that the government, after being briefed on all of this, isn't doing enough and isn't responding. And the fact that there isn't enough response is something that's going to make people less confident in the validity of our Canadian elections, right? So it's like you got to take this stuff seriously because otherwise people aren't going to take our elections seriously. And this is what Trudeau's saying. We have a panel, we have people taking a look at this. It didn't determine the outcome of the elections, but we've already talked about how that can kind of be a little bit of squirmy verbiage, right? It can be, it's 100% true what he's saying, but it doesn't account for what actually happened, right?
Que les Canadiens, en tant que gouvernement, fait bien continuer l'élément.
In the past two elections, as talking about more recent reports. Thank you. I think we're talking about more recent reports, though. So will you declassify the reports so that the public can see them for themselves? And will you establish a public inquiry into Chinese interference in the past two elections as called for by the former electoral officer, Jean-Pierre Kingsley?
I think it is a very good thing that Canadians are understanding how serious it is that China and other countries are continuing to try to destabilize and influence our democracies and our institutions. That's why we have continually given new resources and new tools, including a panel and a task force that we set up way back in 2019 to ensure that our election integrity held, that our national security experts are able to do the work that Canadians expect them to do. We welcome the work that committees are doing. We'll continue to work to give all the tools necessary to our national security agencies so that Canadians can continue to be confident that we are taking this as seriously as it must be. And I say again, we are taking this extremely seriously and always have.
Thank you. Next question.
Afternoon, Prime Minister. Candy Shan with CTV National News. I'd like to ask you about the Canada-Ukraine authorization.
Okay, so that's pretty wild. He's saying, like, when asked the question, will you declassify the reports of for the public to look at so they can see what these CSIS reports are saying? He sort of goes down a different road and doesn't necessarily answer, will we have a public inquiry? And he says, hey, we support the work that's happening in committees in Parliament. Now, this is something that's a little bit frustrating for many people because we know that there is, to an extent, the Liberal government and the NDP tend to be working together right now under the Supply and Confidence Agreement. That gives them more power in these committees as well, because as we saw, if you watch the previous video I made on this topic, we have MPs saying, hey, we need more documents. They can still be redacted. We just want the committee, these documents to be redacted by the committee representatives rather than by Liberal representatives. The main point being, these committees aren't necessarily able to get all of the documents that would be given to the public in some sort of public inquiry. So they're saying we support these committees, but they also have more control over these committees and what information gets out and what information doesn't as a result of motions and amendments to those motions, as we saw last week. I believe that there's also more in this video on this topic. So let me show you how I find it. You can actually pull up a transcript on YouTube by clicking these three buttons here, show transcript. You can go Control F and search through it and see if 25 is the last mention of China. Okay, yeah, so that's all of the responses from Trudeau to this situation. Pretty wild. We've got this document here as well. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Sound. Yeah, you're right. I think you can hear me now, though. I think we're all good. This is what happens when I'm too into a document. I'm too into looking at these things. I don't look over to chat to see. So what I was saying here is that this is pretty wild. This is all we have from Trudeau in terms of the response. We don't want a public inquiry here. But even though the former electoral officer said, hey, we need an inquiry here, he's saying that we must do everything we can to protect the integrity of our electoral systems. We need to find out what has transpired. I favor an independent inquiry because this is what will satisfy Canadians. This is not a minor issue. This is the big point, right? Like, you can't solely rely on these House of Commons committee meetings to do all of these investigations. We need an independent inquiry into these things that will actually satisfy Canadians' concerns about the electoral process, right? If we have all of these allegations, but it's only the House committee that can be sort of manipulated through votes and motions by different members of Parliament who are in power and who can make up a majority in those committees, well, then Canadians aren't going to be fully satisfied as they would be if we had an inquiry that was done by a third party without any sort of partisan ties, right? Because people are always going to say conservatives are blowing this out of proportion. They're looking for ways to make the prime minister look bad, and they're not taking national security seriously enough in asking for these documents to be revealed to this public committee, right? They're saying, hey, the Chinese government would love to get their hands on these CSIS documents, so it's not responsible for us to reveal them in committee here. That's the Liberals' response to what the Conservatives are asking for in committee. So when you have these partisan ties, you're never going to get 100% certainty because people are going to just say the responses of these MPs and the questions they're asking are more politically motivated rather than getting to the bottom of this situation. Pretty wild. The Prime Minister's office on Thursday declined to comment on whether Trudeau would support or launch an independent inquiry into election interference. Seems like that's a no based on the response we just saw. The full extent of the Chinese interference operation is revealed in both secret and top secret CSIS reports that were viewed by the Globe and Mail. Documents outline how China backed the re-election of Trudeau Liberals, but only to another minority government. This is stuff we covered on the stream last time. So I wanted to go live with this today to like let you know what was going on and how shocked I was by that Twitter thread. I know when you sort of talk about these topics and it's in talking about the alleged interference, it sort of feels like it's more more right leaning in terms of the coverage of the topic, right? Because these are allegations against Liberal Party members, right? So oftentimes it feels like that maybe reporting on this is a little too right leaning, right? I'm trying my best to stay down the middle here and just report on what these reports are saying from credible news sources, but absolutely wild if true. The most shocking things in my eyes are like bussing in people that don't live in that riding to vote for the nominee for that riding for the Liberal Party when that nominee will certainly win because of the history of who's won those ridings. What are you thinking is most impactful? I want to go and chat with you a little bit and thank you again for the super chats and the donations that I've seen sort of come in throughout this stream. I appreciate the support of making content like this, and if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and like this video so you can see more content like this. Just wild. I'm taking a look here. Yeah, Sandra says, not shocked, been waiting for more truth to come out. Nanya says, you're Canadian leaning. Yeah, I mean, I like to think that I am. I know no matter what you say, there are people on both sides that are going to say you are the other side, right? That's why I don't reveal who I vote for in elections ever, because I try to be like more of a center voice and just give you my thoughts on things. And that way you can't say like you are just like you're just a liberal hack or you're a conservative bootlicker or whatever people are going to say. Yeah, but just giving you my takes on what I think about this stuff. If that's not rigged, then they use a shovel to drill for oil. Yeah. CSIS should be able to take action on this. But the thing is that CSIS has taken action on this, has produced these documents, and allegedly has briefed the Prime Minister on this. But what CSIS individuals who are now leaking these documents are saying is that the Liberal government isn't taking this seriously enough. Trudeau says, yes, things are serious. That's why we are looking at it in committee. That's why we set up this panel of security individuals to determine that our elections were not interfered with. Oh, Salty Canadian, thank you so much for joining in and becoming a caring Canadian citizen in the chat. I appreciate these the folks who support these live streams like that. And if you enjoy this type of content, let me know, and I'll keep on doing live streams like this where we go into way more detail, like over an hour. Well, this stream is 55 minutes so far, going into the details of these stories. There are only certain things that work here in terms of like what works on a short form video and what works when we can get into more depth. And I really enjoy doing these live streams and the support that people like Salty Canadian give for these live streams. That means a lot. Means a lot. Thank you for that. Maybe the political classes have too much protection from the law, but yeah, potentially. This is the thought, right? Like the CSIS individuals thought that the government wasn't taking this seriously enough, and that's why things are starting to be leaked, because they're worried about the credibility of our elections. So I don't know if the House committee and taking a look at this in more depth is enough at this point to have people believe in our elections again, right? It's wild. Yeah, Tom says, thanks, Russell. I can't stay in the middle. Wild is even blackmail, Russell. Yeah. Great stream. Keep them coming, says Suzanne. Thanks so much for tuning in, Suzanne. We've got Clone and Mr. Funk and SG. Yeah, and thank you again, Salty Canadian, for the support. I appreciate that. Wild stuff, folks. Wild stuff. I think we're going to wrap down the stream now. I might be live again talking about some real estate related stuff later in this evening, but I think my family might be saying, hey, maybe you should actually go take a break and watch some hockey and have a beer, which is what I might also do with the rest of my Saturday evening. But I appreciate you all for tuning in, and thanks so much for subscribing to the channel and for liking these videos and for sharing them with your friends, because that's how we can sort of get this stuff out here. And I do enjoy committing more time to this stuff, and the more support I get from folks like you who are watching at home, the more I can do this stuff, and the more I can sort of shift time away from my other jobs that I do and focus on creating content like this for all of you. Yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. I really hope this stream has helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time. Have a great Saturday, everyone. More to come. Keep your eyes on the channel. Hit those notification bells, all that good stuff. And now I'm going to have a glass of water because that was a lot of talking for an hour. Peace, everyone. Thanks so much.